Hi, I'm Dena Goldberg, also known as DenaDNA, and I'm a genetic counselor as well as a sibling to a person with special needs. So today I'll be reacting to this heartfelt interview where Colin Farrell shares his journey raising a child with Angelman Syndrome. As somebody who understands both the medical aspects and the personal challenges of caring for a loved one with special needs, I hope to provide insights and reflections that resonate with families and caregivers navigating similar paths. Just for context, I have a 28-year-old sister with a chromosome abnormality called ring 18 that causes intellectual and physical disabilities. Let's dive into this powerful conversation together.
I'm very private. I've never had crews within our home. It's a very safe space, but I have to or choose to believe that if James knew that doing this could help families and could help other children and young adults who live with special needs, James would say, "Dad, what are you talking about? Why are you even asking me? It's a no-brainer."
I love that he knows his son well enough to be able to understand that he would want to help others.
James was a very silent baby. He didn't coo, he didn't make any sounds at all. I just thought I'd hit the lottery, I thought I'd have a chill child who's not going to keep me up at night. He'd cry if he was upset, but more than the crying, it was just the constant adaptation to the idea of sound and encroaching language that a child goes through as a course of their natural evolution. And there was none of that. But I didn't know that at the time. As I said, I thought he was just a chill baby and anything but chill. You can hear him. But then he just wasn't hitting benchmarks. He wasn't sitting up, he couldn't sit up. You'd sit him up and he'd and fall over. He wasn't crawling. He couldn't stay up on his legs at all. So we knew that something was up, developmental delays.
Yeah, so when a child is not hitting their milestones in the range that's predicted, then that's considered developmental delay. And that's what was found here.
I think he was a year and a half old maybe when he was diagnosed. We took him to get really checked out, and because of certain things that he was displaying, he was diagnosed as having cerebral palsy. And it was at the time, it probably still is, but in less measure, it was a common misdiagnosis.
So cerebral palsy, or CP, isn't really necessarily a misdiagnosis because it's a clinical diagnosis. CP is diagnosed based off of observable symptoms like muscle stiffness or difficulty with movement. However, the diagnosis doesn't reveal the underlying cause, similar to how a cough indicates a problem, but it doesn't specify if it's due to a cold or the flu or pneumonia. That's why we use and recommend genetic testing in cases of cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, so we can identify an underlying diagnosis that can explain some of the symptoms and can lead to more targeted treatment and support.
Because it shared a lot of the same presentations, a lot of the same characteristics.
Okay, that being said, misdiagnoses can be incredibly challenging for families because the journey from suspecting something is different to getting an accurate diagnosis can be very long and lonely. Many conditions share similar presentations and symptoms, so this makes the diagnostic process quite complex, but essential for appropriate care.
And it wasn't until he was about 2.5 years old that another doctor, pediatric neurologist, spent a little bit of time with him and saw that James, one of the characteristics of Angelman Syndrome is outbreaks of laughter. They call it inappropriate outbreaks of laughter, but I don't know if there is such a thing as inappropriate outbreak of laughter if it comes from a sincere place, and it lacks malice. I've just obviously qualified it greatly, so maybe there is, but the doctor saw that James was laughing a lot in the office, and he was also doing this movement a lot with his hands, but this pediatric neurologist.
That is characteristic of Angelman Syndrome. The most recognizable characteristics of Angelman Syndrome include developmental delays, significant delays in reaching milestones like sitting and crawling and walking, speech impairment. Many of them have little to no speech. A lot of them have this happy demeanor with the frequent smiling and laughing like he describes. Movement and balance issues and difficulty with coordination and walking, and then the seizures, which is common in many individuals with Angelman Syndrome, and they usually start before age 3.
I just took a look at James and said to James's mom, "Has he been tested for Angelman Syndrome?" And Kim said, what's that?
Oh, I'm so glad. Kudos to that neurologist. Yes, it was crucial that neurologist suggested genetic testing, as it led to a clear diagnosis that might have otherwise been missed. Many families I've seen are never offered testing or a referral to genetics, and this only extends their diagnostic odyssey.
Very few people knew about it at the time.
Even though most genetic conditions aren't widely known to the public, those of us in the field of genetics are very familiar with them. We study them and encounter a wide range of different rare genetic conditions regularly. Our work in genetics ensures that even the lesser known conditions are recognized and understood, allowing for appropriate care and intervention.
And the doctor said, well, let me just do a genetic test, a blood test. We can just do a genetic mapping and we'll see. And it came back positive.
Genetic testing can actually often uncover the root cause of developmental delays, seizures, autism, cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities, and other pediatric medical issues, guiding more effective treatments and support. So for any child with any of these, seeing a specialist in a genetics department is vital. And if genetic testing is done with another doctor, it's important to remember that sometimes the first round of tests is negative and a more in-depth test is needed. So I would recommend, if you know somebody or you have a child and you've had negative genetic testing, maybe with your doctor, or you haven't had any at all, to ask for a referral to a medical geneticist and genetic counselor. I'll put some links in the caption. Also, by the way, you can do genetic tests with spit or cheek cells, not just blood. So if you're worried about a kid not wanting to do a blood draw and that's causing a lot of anxiety, you can ask about a saliva or cheek swab sample as well.
So at least we had one of the biggest things, obviously one of the biggest issues and one of the most significant moments you can experience as a child who has developmental disability or delay is getting a diagnosis.
Receiving a diagnosis is absolutely a pivotal moment because it opens the door to resources and support networks. It allows us to tailor interventions that can make a world of difference for the patient and their families. From my experience, families often find such a sense of relief when they know what they're facing, even if it's a difficult diagnosis to hear. Knowing what caused their child's medical issues or their own medical issues and that it wasn't their fault is absolutely crucial and invaluable information. That information alone is worth it for some families to do genetic testing and genetic counseling.
Because then if you get a diagnosis, you can zero in. There are usually people you can find, whether it's a community just emotionally to lean into, so you feel less alone in your struggles.
For my family, we received my sister's diagnosis early on and found the Chromosome 18 Research and Registry Foundation, which completely changed her care and her treatment and had a ripple effect on the rest of our family, including being the reason why I'm a genetic counselor today.
Medical professionals who can actually, and physical therapists who can actually, and people who can have a specific system with which they can present to your child, present to you.
Yes, anytime I know that someone's diagnosed with a new condition, I highly, highly recommend that they connect to the support organization or research group that researches and studies and supports that condition, because I think most people underestimate the profound impact that this can have on their lives and their future care.
And then help your child reach their potential. So getting the diagnosis, I remember the first two questions I asked at the time were, what's the life expectancy and how much pain is involved? And the doctor said life expectancy, as far as we can tell, is the same for you and for me.
Life expectancy questions are really common when someone gets a new diagnosis, and that's definitely a difficult conversation to have. And there's no guarantee. There are definitely people living past what they were once told would be their life expectancy, many times because of improvements in technology and new therapies. But it provides more information with a new diagnosis.
But it's a seizure condition. That was one of the big things, and it's one of the things that parents struggle with greatly, is that our children with Angelman's have seizures. James had plenty of seizures back in the day. I've been in the back of ambulances, I've been in the hospital with him. Thankfully he hasn't had one in 10 or 11 years, which is amazing. My God, James's first steps, I'll never forget James's first steps. 2 weeks short of his 4th birthday. 2 weeks short of his 4th birthday. And we were in the house we lived in at the time, and Deborah, who's amazing, who was here yesterday. I mean, James's team, as I say, they've been in his life for 18 years. They love him so much. Deborah came upstairs and I knew that they were working on walking, and she came upstairs and she said, James has something to show you. And she said, go over there, and I stood over there, and she had him, and she let him go, and he just came. It was so profound. I mean, it was magic. I mean, I'll never forget, and there's the face of determination on him as he just walked towards me, and he took like 6 steps, and I burst into tears. It was.
Yeah. Oh, this is a momentous occasion for any parent, but with a child with special needs, it's often a milestone that they've thought about and worried about and wondered if it was ever going to come. The emotion he's showing just demonstrates the sheer determination and hard work that goes into reaching these milestones for these people, which is something I deeply resonate with.
Because a lot of parents are told, your child's probably not going to walk, and there are many children and young adults with Angelman Syndrome who are wheelchair bound, and there are other children you'll see who run around as if there wasn't a single, chromosomal issue in their body at all. And James is somewhere kind of in the middle of that field.
There's truly a spectrum of what genetic diseases can look like. Each individual falls really on a spectrum of severity, meaning that no two people with the same condition will have exactly the same experience. Even with the same diagnosis, there's a wide range of how it can manifest and how symptoms can be present. And it's really impossible to predict exactly what your child's future may hold and what their strengths and challenges may be. Over time, families will discover what makes their child special, and what they like, and what they're good at, and what they need help with as they grow and develop.
But yeah, if your first steps are always a significant thing. They're spoken about, a father or a mother misses the first steps, they're pissed off for the rest of their lives. It's a really, really powerful benchmark, for us bipedal creatures, and to be told that he may never walk and see those first steps was just, I'll never forget it. It was so overwhelmingly beautiful. A typical day with Jason not working, we'll just hang out, we'll play ball, swim in the pool. He loves movies, we'll watch movies, go out and get a cheeseburger. He loves his In-N-Out burgers. He spends a lot of time with his partner in crime, / carer / buddy / person, Damon.
That's another thing. Caregivers tend to fit so many roles. So it sounds like he has a really great team and a really great caregiver, several caregivers. Who,
because I work, I've had another point of my good fortune. I've had live-in care, so I can move freely and work, and I think it's also been great for James because it gives him, again, that autonomy. He knows I'm here. We love-ins and cuddles all day long, and then he goes out and he goes to the beach and he goes to Universal Studios, and he's a good life, James. Yeah, he's a happy young man, I'm glad to say. I'm proud of him every day because I just think he's magic. Do you know what I mean? I'm proud of both my boys. I've been blessed to have 2 really, really fine young men in my charge. I'm not even joking. Every day I just think they're just magic, both of them.
I wonder what his other son's life is like and if he is affected in the way that a lot of siblings are. As a sibling, I've come across a lot of other siblings that just have this really special bond with their affected sibling. I also hear a lot of parents just talking about how special that bond is.
For them, and I'm just proud of the kind of fellas they are. And I don't want to be willy-nilly if anyone's watching this and just like, oh, everything my children do is perfect, and I just tell them they're perfect all the time. No, we have raging arguments here. We have disagreements, and there's stuff that happens that's not cool, and I say it's not cool, and I try and give context for why I think it's not cool. But not that regularly. They're just really good dudes. I have 2 really good dudes, and yeah, James is, he works harder than I've ever had to work on myself. He really does. Take James sometimes 90 seconds to take a t-shirt off, but he can take the t-shirt off, but you sit it out with him. His socks, that's a whole thing. All these things are huge, huge achievements. And so if anything, he also gifts me with the ability to look at the human being and the human body and life as a marvel, because I see how much he struggles with things that I would never have given a second's thought to, that I would just, like many of us, take for granted, What would I say I'm most grateful for? I think I'll steal Jamie Lee Curtis's answer and say my sobriety in a way. Everything is magnified when you have a child with special needs. You know, you're even more aware that your child really needs you around and is going to need a lot of help and a lot of support. So James was about 2 when I got clean, when I got sober, and he was a big part of me putting the bottle down. You know, a big part of it, because I was in no condition to be a friend, never mind a father of a child with such exacting needs.
It is also really important to recognize the strength it takes to overcome such personal struggles to provide the best possible life and care for your child in any situation, really.
And so if it wasn't for my sobriety, I wouldn't be able to be there for James and enjoy in the marvel of his life and support him in the way that I feel that I can. I don't want to paint a picture either that I'm a perfect dad. I make up left, right and centre, but at least, you know, you have to be present to up, so I'm around. But yeah, it's neck and neck, and they're kind of very conjoined, you know, my sobriety and then obviously the two children that I have, James and Henry, are the two greatest, I won't say prides of my life, because pride's a funny one, but I just, yeah, they are the aspects of my life and the presences within my life that I'm most grateful for. For years I've wanted to do something in the realm of providing greater opportunities for families who have a child with special needs to receive the support that they deserve to receive, and basically the assistance in life, in all areas of life, whether it's education, whether it's intervention, therapeutics, social environments that their child can feel like they belong within. And just so that families who have a child with special needs can find a world of meaning and a life of connection for their children, you know. I obviously have a certain amount of means, having had a career in film for 20 plus years now. And we still struggle with finding the kind of support that James deserves and should rightfully have.
Not all families have access to the same help, which can make caring for a child with special needs much harder than it already is. This just shows how important it really is to create support systems so that all families, no matter their circumstances or situations, can get the help that they need.
And particularly up until there are support systems in place across the country, and it varies state to state, but once your child turns 21, they're kind of on their own. All the safeguards that are put in place, all the inclusive programs, special ed classes, that all kind of goes away once your child is 21.
This is a really significant issue. I've seen my parents struggle with this for years, and they're highly educated and good at navigating resources. So I can't imagine families who have less and maybe don't have the ability or the resources available to them.
And so you're left with a young adult who should be an integrated part of our modern society here, and very much more often than not is left behind. And so families struggle.
Creating more and better resources and communities is something that could greatly improve the quality of life for these individuals and their families. I love this call to action for ongoing advocacy and systemic change, and I really hope this interview starts a larger dialogue.
And so James is of an age now, I suppose the reason why we're establishing the foundation now is that James is of an age, he's 20. He's had an extraordinary 20 years. He works incredibly hard to achieve the most, quote unquote, menial of things, the most typical of things, benchmarks that we all experience as typical human beings who don't have any cognitive issues or developmental delays. James has fought very hard to achieve certain benchmarks, and he's done incredible, and he's a really well-adjusted, really happy young man. He's extraordinary. But now we're looking towards the rest of his life. What's the next chapter of James's life look like? Because my fear would be, you know, God forbid, if and when something happens to James's mother or to me, that James would be 30 and 40, and then he would have to go in somewhere into some kind of institute or some kind of residential care at 30 and 40, and there'd be nobody there to call over and to take him out and to have lunch and all that.
Parents very often will worry about who will care for their child when they're gone, ensuring that their needs are met with the same love and attention that they would give them. And this anxiety can be pretty intense when the child requires specialized care or when there's limited options for long-term support. This is why planning for the future and setting up things like guardianships, trusts, or finding a suitable care facility, all of these become a critical part of ensuring that the child's well-being and security is taken care of. And siblings may be looked to as potential caregivers or guardians, but while many of us willingly step into this role out of love and responsibility, not every sibling will want to do this because it does involve significant changes to future planning. These are difficult discussions that families often have, but they're so important to plan for the future and ensure that siblings are as prepared and supported with whatever role they may take on.
But there's very, very few places, and so I want to change that. I want to be a part of, with a great team we have behind this foundation already, particularly Paula Evans out of Chicago, who's been a friend of mine for 15 years. She's just got an engine like you wouldn't believe, and she's on the board as well. So we're just, over time, I don't know, it's early days, like this is the first time I've spoken about it, and obviously the only reason I'm speaking about it is I can't ask James if he wants to do this. I can't ask my son. I have to make a decision call based on knowing James's spirit and knowing what kind of young man he is and the kind of goodness that he has in his heart. And he's bold as brass as well, and he's cheeky as they come, but he's just a damn fine young man. And hopefully over time, over the years, I hope, through funding and through community involvement, we want to take a good look at residential potential for families with young adults who are ready to go out into the world and have a greater sense of community and connection. My initial dream was to create a camp, you know, something in the vein of what beautiful Paul Newman did, you know, and Paul's camp, the Hole in the Wall gang, that's self-generating now as far as budget and finance goes, because he made those lovely pasta sauces and those popcorn, microwave popcorns and things. So I had an idea for a camp that would, you know, it would open in the spring, and it would operate in the spring and the summer and the fall, and then it would close for the winter for repairs. In my mind's eye, I see anywhere between 30 and 80 acres. There would be freestanding chalets, there would be outdoor cinema screen, there would be a rec room, there would be a swimming pool outside.
I love that. Okay, providing a space where both parents and children can find joy, relaxation, and community is invaluable. We are in. I want to see this camp.
There would be a couple of little freestanding wooden massage huts that the parents could go and they could have a little bit of R&R. Parents of children with special needs, they find it hard to do nice things for themselves, you know, and you can guess why. They feel that they just need to it's so all-encompassing. It's all-encompassing being a parent of a typical child, but to have a child who has such profound struggles as many of our children do, it's so all-encompassing that if you do something nice for yourself, or give yourself a massage, or go on a little 2-day road trip with your husband or your wife, you feel like you're being irresponsible. You feel like you're neglecting your child more than if you had a typical child. It's just the way it goes.
I have watched my parents grow older while they're continuing to care for my sister, the adult with special needs. They've given so much of themselves to ensure that she's well taken care of, but it does mean that they rarely get a chance to take a break and spend some time, just the two of them. Their dedication is incredible, but it also makes me wish that they had more opportunities to relax and enjoy life outside of their caregiving roles.
Because your child's needs are so pronounced, and because you feel a sense of guilt as well. It's very complicated, like that you brought your child into the world, that somehow it's your fault that your child was born with whatever the particular condition may be.
Again, with the fault, that's a very common feeling. And part of the genetic counseling session in the pediatric setting is explaining that it's not the fault of either parent.
And so the thing would be to bring parents and the children, both the child with special needs and one or two typical children, brothers, sisters, and bring them all to the camp for a week so that the parents could have a good time. They could get massages, they could splash about, they could sit in the jacuzzi, and their child would be doing activities during the day, and then at night we'd all come together and there'd be meals shared and there'd be cinemas out under the stars and all that kind of stuff. So that was initially what I spoke to Paula about, and then Paula was the one that said, well, do you think it's time to do the foundation? So building a summer camp will be a part of the foundation as well. That'll be a big one for me to leave behind, and it's all because of James, you know, it's all in James's honour. It's a terrifying thought that I'll miss the last, 40 years or 50 years of his life. Just because I won't be there to shepherd and to protect. But what would the perfect, just a life of connection. And so James's last 20, 30, 40, 10 years of James's life, he'll be somewhere where he feels like he belongs, where he feels like he's safe, and where he can garden and watch movies and swim in the pool and go out to the beach and just have a full and meaningful and connected life. That'll be the dream.
I think that this interview overall really well summarized a lot of the challenges and triumphs that families with a person with special needs faces. And I'm really happy that he has provided some insight into this life and support for those on similar journeys. Thank you so much for joining me in this important reaction video. I hope that my perspective as both a genetic counselor and a sibling of a person with special needs was helpful to you. Just remember, every family's experience is incredibly unique. But you are not alone. Leave a comment if you liked this video or the concept of it, or if you have any questions, and follow along on YouTube and on other platforms.